Another name is added to the national transplant waiting list every 10 minutes. This is why it is so vital for you to be aware of the importance of organ and tissue donation and to have clear, honest discussions with your family and your loved ones about what you want. One deceased donor can save up to 8 lives through organ donation and can save and enhance more than 100 lives through the life-saving and healing gift of tissue donation. Organ recipients are selected based primarily on medical need, location, and compatibility. Liver and kidney disease kill over 120,000 people each year, more than Alzheimer's, breast cancer, or prostate cancer. There are many myths and misunderstandings about donation. Some people feel that there are certain things that could keep them from being an organ donor, such as age, illness, or physical defects. But the truth is, each person's medical condition is evaluated at the time of their death to determine what organs and tissues are viable for donation. People living with chronic diseases or those who have a history of cancer or other serious diseases are still encouraged to join the donor registry. Another misconception is that if doctors know that I'm registered to be an organ or tissue donor, they won't work as hard to save my life. That is very false. The first priority of a medical professional is to save lives when sick or injured people come to the hospital. Organ and tissue donation isn't even considered or discussed until after the death is declared. Typically, the doctors and nurses involved in a person's care before death are not involved in the recovery or transplantation of donated organs or tissues. Some people are concerned that their religion doesn't support organ and tissue donation, but the reality is most major religions support them. Typically, religions view organ and tissue donation as acts of charity and goodwill. It's important, if you have concerns, to discuss them with your spiritual advisor. Some people are worried their family will be charged if they donate their organs. But the truth is, costs associated with recovering and processing organs and tissues for transplant are never passed on to the donor family. Your family will pay for your medical care and your funeral costs, but not for the organ donation. Some people feel that if you're rich or a celebrity, you can move up the waiting list more quickly, but that is not true. Severity of illness, the time spent waiting, the blood type and match potential are the factors that determine a person's place on the waiting list. A patient's income, race, or social status are never taken into account in the allocation process. Some people are worried that after donating an organ or tissue, the closed casket funeral is their only option. But organ procurement organizations treat each donor with the utmost respect and dignity, and they allow a donor's body to be viewed in an open casket funeral. They are carefully taken care of. It's important for veterans to know that they have many rights because of their service. All veterans are entitled to a free burial in a national cemetery and a grave marker. And spouses and dependent children are also entitled to a lot and marker when buried in a national cemetery. There are no charges for opening or closing the grave, a vault or liner, or for setting the marker in the national cemetery. The family is generally responsible for other expenses, including transportation to the cemetery. Many states have established veteran cemeteries, and their eligibility requirements and other details may vary. It is important to be aware that you may see ads for so-called veteran specials by commercial cemeteries. These cemeteries sometimes offer a free plot for the veteran, but they charge exorbitant fees for an adjoining lot for the spouse, as well as high fees for opening and closing each grave. Evaluate the bottom line cost and be sure that you have all the information to be sure the special is as special as you were led to believe. There is also a certain amount of compensation for veterans who choose not to be buried in national cemeteries to help defray burial or cremation costs. Funeral planning and logistics can be very draining. Handling the arrangement for someone who has died whether expected or not, takes a lot of time and energy to complete. It is a very important responsibility to carry out the plans, wishes, directions, and desires of another. If you have to make those decisions without guidance, it can be especially demanding, which is another reason why discussing this with your loved ones early and often is a great blessing for them. Thinking ahead can help you make informed and thoughtful decisions about funeral arrangements. It allows you to choose the specific items you want and need and compare the prices offered by several funeral providers. It also spares your survivors the stress of making these decisions under the pressure of time and strong emotions. You can make arrangements directly with a funeral establishment. An important consideration when planning a funeral pre-need is where the remains will be buried, entombed, or scattered. In the short time between the death and burial of a loved one, many family members find themselves rushing to buy a cemetery plot or grave, often without careful thought or a personal visit to the site. That's why it's in the family's best interest to buy cemetery plots before you need them. You may wish to make decisions about your arrangements in advance, but not pay for them in advance. Keep in mind that over time, prices may go up and businesses may close or change ownership. However, in some areas with increased competition, prices may go down over time. It's a good idea to review and revise your decisions every few years and to make sure that your family is aware of your wishes. Put your preferences in writing. Give copies to family members and your attorney, and keep a copy in a handy place. Don't designate your preferences in your will, because a will is often not found or read until after the funeral. Avoid putting the only copy of your preferences in a safe deposit box, because your family may have to make arrangements on a weekend or holiday when the banks are closed. You will need 10 to 15 original copies of the death certificate issued by the state. They usually cost around $25 each, and you will need these to carry out many state functions. Everyone should pre-plan, but not everyone should prepay. Millions of Americans have entered into contracts to arrange their funerals and prepay some or all of the expenses involved. Laws of individual states govern the prepayment of funeral goods and services. Various states have laws to help ensure that these advance payments are available to pay for the funeral products and services when they're needed. But protection can vary widely from state to state, and some state laws offer little or no effective protection. Some state laws require the funeral home or cemetery to place a percentage of the prepayment in a state-regulated trust, or to purchase a life insurance policy with the death benefits assigned to the funeral home or cemetery. If you're thinking about prepaying for funeral goods and services, it's important to consider these issues before putting down any money. What are you paying for? Are you buying only merchandise like a casket and vault, or are you purchasing funeral services as well? What happens to the money you've prepaid? States have different requirements for handling funds paid for prearranged funeral services. It's important to know what your state's laws are. What happens to the interest income on money that is prepaid and put into a trust account? Are you protected if the firm you deal with goes out of business? Can you cancel the contract and get a full refund if you change your mind? What happens if you move to a different area or die while away from home? Some prepaid funeral plans can be transferred, but often at an added cost. Be sure to tell your family about the plans you've made. Let them know where the documents are filed. Because if your family isn't aware that you've made plans, your wishes may not be carried out. And if family members don't know that you've prepaid the funeral costs, they could end up paying for the same arrangement. Many people don't realize that in most states, they are not legally required to use a funeral home to plan and conduct a funeral. However, because they have little experience with many details and legal requirements involved, and may be emotionally distraught when it's time to make the plans, they find the services of a professional funeral home to be a comfort. Some of the reasons people select a certain funeral home or cemetery include because it's close to home, because it has served the family in the past, or because it's been recommended by someone they trust. However, limiting the search to just one funeral home may risk paying more than necessary for the funeral or narrowing their choice of goods and services. They may end up paying much more than necessary. More than almost any other industry, different funeral homes have different prices. Many studies have shown that doing a small amount of research can save you thousands of dollars. Funeral director and advocate Caitlyn Doughty says, "An all-inclusive cremation at my funeral home is $895. The exact same cremation at another funeral home nearby is $3,500. Asking questions about funeral prices or comparing different funeral prices is not disrespectful to the person who has died. Emphatically not disrespectful." Caitlyn Doughty goes on to say, "Sometimes more is not better. Sometimes more is just more." Would you pay thousands of dollars more for the exact same thing in any other area of your life? Comparison shopping may seem scary, but it does not have to be difficult, especially if it's done before the need for a funeral arises. Thinking ahead can help you make informed and thoughtful decisions about funeral arrangements. It allows you to choose the specific items you want and need and compare prices at several different locations. For decades, the funeral industry was totally unregulated, and some pretty terrible abuses occurred. In 1984, the Federal Trade Commission passed the Funeral Rule that states that all funeral homes must disclose in writing the prices for all goods and services and give prices over the phone. They must also disclose in writing certain consumer rights. They may not force a customer to purchase more than is wanted. They may not lie to consumers about state laws. They may not make preservative claims for embalming and caskets. Right now, there is a movement afoot trying to get the funeral rule amended to include disclosure of their prices online as well. Right now, there is not that rule, and most funeral homes do not put their prices online. Rather surprisingly, the FTC has a really good series of articles on funeral planning, as well as on many, many other subjects from buying a home to healthy living. They are a really good resource. Check them out at ftc.gov. Sometimes it's more convenient and less stressful to price shop funeral homes by telephone. The funeral rule requires funeral directors to provide price lists and price information over the phone to any caller who asks for it. In addition, many funeral homes are happy to mail you their price lists, although that is not required by law. When comparing prices, be sure to consider the total cost of all the items together, in addition to the cost of single items. Every funeral home should have a price list that includes all the items essential for the different types of arrangements it offers. Many funeral homes offer package funerals that may cost less than buying individual items or services. Offering package funerals is permitted by law, as long as an itemized price list is also provided. But you can't accurately compare total costs unless you use the price lists. In addition, there's a trend toward consolidation in the funeral home industry, and many neighborhood funeral homes may appear to be locally owned when in fact they're owned by a national corporation. There are 3 that are huge nationwide. If this issue is important to you, you may want to ask if the funeral home is independent and locally owned. Cemetery plots can be expensive, especially in urban and metropolitan areas. Most, but not all, cemeteries require you to purchase a grave liner, which will cost several $100s. Note that there are charges, usually hundreds of dollars, to open a grave for interment and additional charges to fill it in. Perpetual care on a cemetery plot sometimes is included in the purchase price, but it's very important to verify that point before you buy the site or service. If it's not included, look for a separate endowment care fee for maintenance and groundskeeping. If you plan to bury your loved one's cremated remains in a mausoleum or columbarium, you can expect to purchase a crypt and pay opening and closing fees, as well as charges for endowment and other services. The FTC's funeral rule does not cover cemeteries and mausoleums unless they sell both funeral goods and funeral services. The average interior size of a casket is 83 inches long by 28 inches wide by 24 inches deep. The average interior is 79 inches by 24 inches. Based upon these measurements, the standard casket will accommodate an adult up to about 6.5 feet tall and 2 feet wide. You can get caskets that are larger or smaller, but you may end up paying a premium. If you are dealing with someone who is much larger than average, make sure that you are very honest and upfront with anyone who will be dealing with handling the body, since they will need to make special preparations. Caitlyn Doughty did an excellent video on this, and I am including a link in the comments. Did you know that you can buy a casket from Costco or Walmart.com or Amazon? Yes, you can. And you can save thousands of dollars by doing it. These two caskets, which are made of identical materials, one was purchased online from skycaskets.com, and the other is the price from a funeral home. And actually, this is a funeral home that has lower end prices. And they are virtually identical, and yet there is a price difference of many hundreds of dollars. This is typical. You will be surprised as you call around the amount of money that is different from one place to another. Under federal law, funeral homes are required to accept a casket purchased or built by a third party without charging any kind of markup or handling fee, or requiring family members to be there to accept it when it's delivered. Many casket sales places have overnight delivery as a standard option. It is also now, there are places, Funeralocity is one of them, that search for prices and compare so that they help you with this process. They're a good resource to have, and I've linked to a couple of them in the comments. There are many myths about what is required or necessary and why about common funeral things. Embalming is not required by law or for hygienic purposes. The purpose of embalming is to keep a body looking good for a funeral. That is all. Although some morticians have marketed it as eliminating the fear of being buried alive, and that is true. If you have all of your blood drained out of you and replaced with toxic chemicals, there is no chance that you will be buried alive. It does not prevent a body from decaying. It does not make a body more sanitary or prevent illness. Autopsies are only required in a few cases. An autopsy is defined as a post-mortem examination of the body, both externally and internally, for purposes of diagnosing disease, injury, to determine cause of death, and is ideally done within 24 hours of death. Autopsies may include laboratory analysis of tissue, cell samples, and body fluids as well. Pathologists and forensic pathologists are the medical specialists trained to perform autopsies. An autopsy may be ordered by the coroner or medical examiner to determine the cause or manner of death, or to recover potential evidence such as a bullet or alcohol content in the blood. Policy varies across the United States, but typically unwitnessed, tragic, or suspicious deaths require an autopsy. This is referred to as a forensic autopsy, and that is what is most commonly portrayed on TV crime shows and movies. There is another type of autopsy called a clinical autopsy. Families may elect to have an autopsy performed to identify any disease that may be inherited, thereby posing a potential risk for family members. Also, a family may authorize a hospital autopsy to determine the extent of a known disease, to assess the effects of therapies that were being used to treat the disease. This could be beneficial from a medical research standpoint. Burial vaults are a cemetery requirement. They serve no health or sanitary purpose. Their only purpose for existing is to keep the ground from caving in as things settle and to make it easier to mow. The full service funeral is often referred to by funeral providers as a traditional funeral. Usually includes viewing or visitation, a formal funeral service, use of a hearse to transport the body to the funeral site and cemetery, burial, entombment, or cremation of the remains. It is generally the most expensive type of funeral. In addition to the funeral home's basic service fee, costs often include embalming and dressing the body, rental of the funeral home for the viewing or service, use of vehicles to transport the family if they don't use their own, and many other miscellaneous fees. The costs of a casket, cemetery plot or crypt, and other funeral goods and services must also be factored in. This makes the average cost of a funeral $9,000 to $12,000, sometimes going up over $20,000. The National Funeral Directors Association, they quoted the median costs for an adult funeral with viewing and burial in 2017, $975 for body preparation, $2,400 for the casket, $2,100 for basic services fee, $925 for the use of facilities, $475 for hearse and car, plus $325 transfer of remains, which is moving the body from one place to another, and an additional $160 for memorial printing, with the total cost coming out to $7,360. There is also a huge environmental cost. Each year in the United States, 300 million board feet of wood, 104,272 tons of steel, 2,700 tons of copper and bronze, and 1,636,000 tons of reinforced concrete are buried in cemeteries. That's enough wood to build 4.5 million homes. There is a huge environmental impact from many things. Interestingly, while many people worry about how a body could contaminate groundwater, body biodegrading will not. However, the toxic ingredient, primarily the formaldehyde in embalming fluid, can seriously contaminate groundwater and can create an incredible health hazard. However, you don't have to do what everybody else does. You have options. When you're thinking of cooking dinner, there is a spectrum of options that you will use depending on your time, your interests, and your circumstances. On one hand, you could cook a dinner entirely from scratch from ingredients that you grew organically in your garden. Then you could have a meal that you cooked from scratch from ingredients that you bought at the grocery store. Continuing on the spectrum, there's a meal that you cook from a pre-assembled kit of ingredients. Then there's the food that you order from a restaurant, have delivered, and you eat in your own home. And finally, at the far end of the spectrum, you have eating food that someone else prepared in a restaurant. None of these options is wrong or right. They just depend on your need and your circumstances. This is actually very similar to the spectrum of options that are available for body disposal, with the traditional American funeral being at the far end of the spectrum, you having many, many other options. There is a growing movement of people who choose to care for their own loved ones at home. It is legal in all 50 states, and there are books and websites that can help with every aspect. Many people find it very comforting to be able to do this final service for their loved one. You can also do as many of the aspects of home burial as you feel comfortable with and have a mortician do a few of the other tasks. This plan, of course, works better when you've communicated with the funeral home, but most of them are happy to work with you and will do as much or as little as you need. Home funerals also offer a great deal of variety in the burial container. Often family members make or assemble a simple wooden casket. There are kits available online. Some people choose to use a special cardboard box. Whether the container is wooden or cardboard, they may have the loved ones decorated in ways that are important to them, with art, with pictures, or with written messages. Some people have painted on it. Some people have traced or painted handprints. Both of these options are much more environmentally friendly than the average commercial casket. According to the Home Funeral Alliance, the top reasons for electing to take care of the deceased include, in no particular order, to take the time to truly be present, to avoid outsourcing the responsibility they choose to assume themselves, to avoid professionalizing a family rite of passage, to make meaning of the death, to begin healing the family and community, to take environmental responsibility by forgoing invasive and toxic procedures, to make the funeral affordable, to find spiritual connection, and to participate more fully in their own lives and in their family life. This is a much more affordable option. At the low end, $250 is for getting 10 certified death certificates because they're about $25 each. And in all other areas, you can spend as much or as little as you choose. The next option on the spectrum is a burial or memorial society. This is a group that uses the principle of group buying power to negotiate with certain funeral homes for the lowest possible price. You pay a one-time fee, which is usually less than $50, to join. It is a lifetime membership, and your membership can transfer to another state if you move. You will have to work with the funeral home or homes that are participating providers, and you may have a more limited selection, but you will save thousands of dollars and you will have a strong support network. For some people, the idea of wrapping the body in a plain shroud or placing it into a plain unadorned coffin appeals to those who prefer their burial arrangement to be simple, natural, and unpretentious. Because green burials do not involve embalming, fancy caskets, or concrete vaults, they can be a very cost-effective alternative to conventional burials, lowering the cost by thousands of dollars. If the family supplies their own shroud or coffin, the cost can be further reduced. In Ohio currently, there are 5 natural burial grounds. One is a hybrid, which is simply an area of a traditional cemetery that is set aside for natural burials. Another is a natural burial ground that not only emphasizes natural burial, but also doesn't use herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, and it encourages sustainable management practices. 3 of these are conservation burial grounds, which puts the land into a land conservancy and commits burial fees to pay for land protection, restoration, and management, and restores it to a native environment. While the plots are often more expensive than a traditional cemetery, that is offset by not having to purchase a vault, embalming, or a casket. If you do choose a casket, you need to make sure that it's biodegradable. There are many, many options available, including plain wood, bamboo, wicker, and cardboard. These options go well with a home funeral, but there are some funeral homes that are willing to do green burials, and you can find options linked on the Green Burial Council website. This is a grave site at the Kokosing Reserve, which is in Gambier, Ohio. This can be a much less expensive option. The human body is a tremendously useful thing. It seems very wasteful to me to pay thousands of dollars to bury something that is so valuable. You can arrange in advance to donate your body to a specific medical school or to science in general, but this is a decision that has to be prepared for in advance. Generally, they use the body for a set amount of time and then cremate the remains. And you can choose to have the remains returned to your family or sprinkled or entombed in a dedicated memory garden that they maintain. You do need to be aware that if you do this, the medical school has rights of refusal, so that if you die in a way that makes your body unusable to them, you need to have a backup disposal plan. Personally, I am donating my body to the medical school at Case Western Reserve University, where my cousin went to medical school. There is another benefit to this. They will pick up my body and transport it for free if I live within 75 miles of the school. And according to Google Maps, my house is 73.5 miles away from the school. So that appeals to the more economical, thrifty side of my nature. That is a great benefit because transporting a corpse can be surprisingly expensive. For myself, I agree with Mary Roach, who says in her fascinating book, Stiff, The Curious Life of Human Cadavers. Cadavers are our superheroes. They brave fire without flinching, withstand falls from buildings, and head-on car crashes. I take the Superman point of view. What a shame to waste these powers, to not use them for the betterment of humankind. Now, there are other options available, which you may or may not have heard of. One of them, which is becoming increasingly available, is alkaline hydrolysis. This is a much more environmentally friendly method of final disposition than cremation, which uses a large amount of fuel, and cremation can also release toxins like mercury from fillings and other toxins into the air. Alkaline hydrolysis yields a similar result. It uses water, heat, and a strong alkaline, which is lye, to break down the body. However, it is currently only legal in 18 states. These states include Oregon, Missouri, Minnesota, Maryland, Maine, Kansas, Illinois, Florida, Colorado, Georgia, Wyoming, Idaho, Nevada, California, and Utah. Another new development, which is not legal yet in the United States, is called promession. In promession, the body is freeze-dried with liquid nitrogen and then vibrated into ash. It is legal in Sweden, the UK, and South Korea. I'm hoping that it comes here. Eternal reefs are having cremated remains put into concrete balls that are the basis for new coral reefs. This is not an alternative to cremation, but it is an alternative method of disposing of your ashes. Biourns are also another alternative of what to do with cremated remains. It is a biodegradable urn that has a tree seed and fertilizer built into it. And you can choose the type of tree and then plant the entire urn as a memorial. They also offer a high-tech watering device. You may have heard about mushroom soup, which began as an idea by an artist, J. Rim Lee, who presented it as a concept at a TED conference. It's also called an infinity soup. Since her initial presentation, it has been improved, and they are now commercially available either as a suit or a shroud. And there is a wonderful documentary movie about the first adopter of the mushroom suit, which is called Suiting Dennis. And I will link to that in the comments. Washington State just became the first state to legalize human composting. It is an accelerated form of decomposition by which a corpse is placed in a vessel with wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. Oxygen is then pumped in to increase heat-loving thermophilic microbial activity. And after a month, a corpse will yield approximately a cubic yard of fluffy, high-quality soil, which is about 4 wheelbarrows full. I wish that this had been available when my mom died, because she would have loved being turned into high-quality compost. Some people think that's a little bit icky, but when you realistically look at it, it is less sticky to be quickly composted and biodegrade into your natural elements than to be locked into an airtight sealed box, pumped full of toxic chemicals, and left. The rotting process that occurs after embalming is much less pleasant than the process that occurs to a natural body. And I will not go into details because they are extremely unpleasant. What happens to us after we die? Hobbs replies, I think we play saxophone for an all-girl cabaret in New Orleans. And Calvin says, so, you believe in heaven? Call it what you like. Whatever choices you make, know that you have options and that your choices will affect those you love and the world around you. The best decision you can make is to start planning and communicating with those you love right now. Remember, procrastination is a choice. It just means that you choose to put the responsibility and duty on someone else at a time when they're already burdened with grief and stress. I encourage you not to make that your choice. Your decisions now will be a tremendous gift for those you leave behind. Thank you for your time.